Hello, and welcome to another episode of Archives and Anchovies, the podcast about whatever it is I want to talk about that week. So this week is a pretty sweet week for me, and that's no pun intended. I have an opportunity to take a little vacation, so I'm actually recording this on a Saturday before I leave, and we'll be gone for the entire week. But I have had an opportunity this week to also do some relaxing while I've been at home. And one of the things that I was doing this week during my time off is sitting by the fire in my backyard, just kind of relaxing. It's not very not very cold here, but it is relatively chilly in the evening, so it's nice to just hang out and have a fire, maybe have a drink while I'm doing that. But one of my favorite things to do while I'm sitting out there, or pretty much any night, is have a bowl of ice cream. And I know this is kind of an interesting topic and an interesting way to go about getting there, but I really love ice cream pretty much in every type of form, whether it be hand packed ice cream, whether it be soft serve, all kinds of things. So it got me thinking. So, how did we come about to have ice cream? Where did ice cream come from? More than that, I even wanted to know, how did we decide to start putting caramel and hot fudge and all kinds of things, nuts, cherries, whipped cream, all that kind of stuff? How did we go from having a frozen dessert to something that we now cover with all kinds of even more sugar and sweet? So that's what this episode is about. This one is going to be kind of fun because it's one of the, pretty much anytime I talk about food, it's something that I don't mind exploring the past, but it's pretty cool. Just like any of the topics that I have, once I get into it, it seems that it makes me go down a rabbit hole of looking at other things. So we could go off on some tangents on this one. I just don't know how it's going to go. Have some notes on it, but who knows how it's going to actually go. So basically, how ice cream kind of began, and it's very interesting because we think of it in its current form. We go to the freezer section and the frozen food section in our grocery store today, and there's all kinds of things. There's all kinds of things frozen. There's all kinds of things that are treats and ice cream type delicacies, I guess you would say, in there. So you can get ice cream bars, you can just get ice cream, you can get ice cream sandwiches. There's all kinds of stuff that you can get. So kind of nice that we have a wide variety. Obviously, it wasn't always that way. So all the way back in 200 BC, really ancient times, kind of the first thoughts of what ice cream might have been. They had kind of an idea in China, actually, to put rice milk into a big, basically a metal jar, and they would make it ice cold. So they would put it and they would pack it in snow, and they would basically wait. So that wasn't necessarily the technique that we use today, but it was super cold and then frozen. I don't know if you've ever had like a refrigerator like I do, where one of our we have two refrigerators. One of the refrigerators we have, if we stick soda in the back of that fridge, probably within 48 hours, it's pretty much a solid block of ice, or at least it has some ice crystals, which is really delicious to drink as well. I'm not going to discount that, because actually on a nice hot summer day here, you pour an ice cold Coke and it's got some of that crystallization in there, and then how it iced over. It's more like a slushy or Slurpee, if you remember Slurpees from 7-Eleven. That's kind of what it turns into. So 200 BC, rice milk was kind of the first frozen dessert. At that point in time, did they have toppings? No, it was probably just the frozen rice milk. But, it is something to where we know that they did have this as maybe a delicacy back then. So history is a little bit fuzzy on that, because it's not like they wrote down, hey, here's, we basically froze milk today, and then we ate it. It was great. There's nothing that really is documented for that. So it's not really until about the 1600s that ice cream kind of starts showing up in Europe. So it's not made for everybody. If you listen to the Christmas podcast that I did a couple of weeks ago, you know that there was a lot of times that the royal families and things like that had luxury items that the commoners couldn't have. So it wasn't something that every commoner had. Kings and queens basically ate it at banquets and did stuff when they had fancy get-togethers or they had balls or something of that nature. So where they would be able to have an extra kind of extra dessert, an extra dessert, something like that. So the thing is, though, they still didn't. That's not when toppings got involved, or got invented. They basically just had some milk and cream and put it together like that, and they had it like that. For them, it was probably a fancy treat. For us today, eating plain ice cream's kind of like having a hamburger that you just go and it's a bun and a meat patty. You don't have any condiments on it. There's not ketchup. There's no ranch, of course. That's a sidebar from another discussion where I talked about ranch pretty extensively during a golf podcast, but let's not go back into that. But it is something that they just basically didn't have anything. If you had just meat on a bun, it would be not as exciting today, but for them back then, it was pretty good. It was functional, but probably not very fun. So that's in the kind of the 1600s. If we zip forward to the 1700s, our founding fathers actually in America here, they loved their ice cream, and not just loved it, but they were obsessed. So the modern day America ice cream, United States of America, I should say, is really started with the founding fathers. So they started a country. That wasn't enough. They also really just needed to have some sort of social ice cream dessert for the get-togethers that they had. But kidding aside, they really did take this very, very seriously, and they're obsessed with it. George Washington, in fact, while he was president, he actually had a serious ice cream habit. So he, in 1790, so if you think of 1776 and all the things that were coming just after that, he actually had a ice cream machine built for his residence. At that point in time, it cost about $200. So if you think about inflation and how that goes from $200 to today, it's several $1,000s. So it was definitely a luxury ice cream, and that much money in 1790 was thousands. So George Washington was very, very serious about his ice cream. Obviously, he had many meetings at his residence before the White House was built and things like that, so that we were I should say we as a country didn't host a lot of delegates in a specific space. It was a lot of those were held in people's homes. So he owned the ice cream machine. He also had his own cows. So the cream was cream from his own cows. So that was a huge flex for him, saying, hey, this is, first farm to table ice cream. I don't know. So he literally had cows in his pasture at Mount Vernon, and he would use that to make his own ice cream for his guests. So the hard part about making ice cream was the fact that it takes ice. So ice cream is very cold. It's very frozen. At that point in time in the 1790s, there was no refrigeration. So as I mentioned a little bit ago, we go to the store and we look in the ice cream section, or we go to where, the frozen dessert section is, or something of that nature. You go to McDonald's, even though their ice cream machine is broken more than 80% of the time. If you read the memes that are on the internet, they still have something that keeps that ice cream frozen at that point in time. Well, the 1790s, they didn't have refrigeration. They really didn't have a great system. So what they actually did was they took frozen chunks of the Potomac River and they stored it. So it was something that was very difficult to store ice year round, but they managed to figure out a way. So he had a basically an ice house where he could store it, and that way he could enjoy that dessert anytime he wanted to. So Washington's out here running a brand new country. He's also eating a bunch of ice cream. He's got his own cows. He developed a way to store ice. I mean, he was just a multitasking monarch. Well, actually, he wasn't a monarch. I should take that back. He was the president. So he was just amazing at what he was doing. He wasn't the only one, though, in his own administration that loved ice cream. Thomas Jefferson, yes, that Thomas Jefferson that was the ambassador to France, which is an important factor in bringing ice cream over to America. Also, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Also, had a lot of things that he did in his presidency as well, but was also a very much a lover of ice cream. I mean, Jefferson was more of probably a thought person than Washington was, as I've read, some biographies and things like that, as him being a little more emotional. Jefferson was probably more of a scientist about the way he did things. So Jefferson, as I mentioned, was obviously the ambassador to France. So in the 1780s, that's kind of when he reportedly kind of met ice cream, and he thought, I got to bring this to America. So he brought back a French recipe. There's some debate. It's either a 15 to 18 step recipe, but what's super cool is that he actually has a handwritten version of this recipe that he brought from France. And you can actually still see this recipe today. So, in the Library of Congress, yes, our Library of Congress in the United States of America, there is a handwritten copy of this recipe by Thomas Jefferson for ice cream. So, Declaration of Independence, Revolutionary War, then wrote down, a recipe for ice cream. It's just like, well maintained. He is definitely a person that had a lot of different culture, especially from France. A full 18 steps. I mean, if you think about it now, you think about modern day recipes, they sometimes have a lot of steps, but that was probably a lot back then. So Jefferson had all kinds of time, apparently, to perfect ice cream making with all of the things that were going on in the country. Then he also became president of the United States as well. But probably still, when he did things of state, he definitely probably had ice cream served as dessert. So Jefferson's recipe basically involved a custard base, so a little bit different than what we might have today. Carefully monitoring temperatures and using special cream maker that he brought back from France. He introduced ice cream basically to America at the presidential level. He served it at a state dinner, and the guests were amazed by it. So that's really how it got introduced. Some had never seen it before. And so if you can imagine being a guest with Jefferson, and all of a sudden he brings out this frozen treat and this frozen miracle that tastes amazing, still no toppings, but it's probably still tasted amazing. You would think, wow, what exactly is this? Is this some sort of witchcraft? Did you just go out and take a big ball of snow and put a bunch of flavoring and sugar in it to make it taste so good? What exactly did you do? So pretty cool in that. Jefferson served his ice cream also, like they did in France, in warm pastry shells. So this could essentially be the ancestor maybe of an ice cream cone. So if you think of a little shell made of pastry, that's kind of what an ice cream cone may have developed into. So it was really kind of interesting that it created a hot and cold sensation. I think of it now, if you've ever gone to a Mexican food restaurant and had deep fried ice cream, it's kind of interesting because the ice cream is frozen solid in a block, but they still actually do fry it. And that's pretty cool because when it comes out, there's still some like warm honey that's put over the top of it. And then you get that warm and cold sensation, and it's kind of crunchy. So it's really nice. But Jefferson was doing this, 200 years ago. So it's pretty amazing. He obviously wasn't making a deep fried ice cream at that point in time, but he was still making ice cream. And that recipe of his, a good friend of mine told me, actually his name is Sonny. He'll be in a podcast episode next time. So you'll actually get to meet him because we're doing a video podcast, a special guest for my 10th episode, as this is the 9th. But he told me that if you go to Mount Rushmore, there's an ice cream shop that actually serves that recipe that Thomas Jefferson wrote. So if you ever want to try it for yourself, you find yourself over there in the Black Hills, going to visit Mount Rushmore, definitely take a stop to do that. I plan to actually go next summer. So I'm hoping that my wife and I, in our RVing adventures next year, have a chance to stop by there, maybe sample some of that ice cream as well, or maybe a little bit more than a sample in my case, because I just really like ice cream. So I probably will get a half gallon and eat it all myself. But I will have toppings, which they still didn't have. But one thing that they did have at that point in time was some savory accompaniments. So they didn't have maybe the sweet things that we know now, but they did have little like maybe macaroons, which all French as well, or some wafers. It's not toppings, but it is something that was associated and was aside to the ice cream that they were serving. So it's something that they started to do, and eventually, a long time from now, from then, would lead to having toppings. So that is actually pretty cool. But the thing about Jefferson and Washington's era toppings, they were not pretty. I would say they weren't very refined, right? So they might have had some fruit preserves, and they weren't super fancy, but it was, candied fruit if you're really going like all out and things like that. But there wasn't really a whole lot of doing it. So, as I would say, we were sort of in the dark ages. If we're in the golden time now of ice cream, then we're kind of in the dark ages of ice cream at that point in time. Come all the way forward, almost another 100 years, 1874, and everything changed when uh, soda was born. So in Philadelphia, basically in 1874, that's when soda was born. Someone then decided to mix ice cream and soda water and flavored syrup, and boom, suddenly we've got our first real topping associated with what was happening at the time. So people went wild for it. So there's some pretty interesting facts that come here. So you had soda that was created, and you had basically soda water, and you had this ice cream, and people were uh, wanting to get it all the time. And as you'll see in just a little bit, it wasn't always available all the time, because what ended up happening is they created something called an ice cream sundae. Now, we know this, of course, today, and it's definitely probably a staple of when you go get ice cream, whether you go to like a Baskin Robbins or you go to a Cold Stone. You can always get it made into a sundae. Has all kinds of toppings. You can put whatever you want on it. But it wasn't always that way. So this was pretty revolutionary for the ice cream. And several towns actually claim that they invented the sundae, and they all have interesting origin stories for the sundae. Mostly when I looked things up this week, this was the primary store for it. But one legend says that it was invented in Wisconsin in the 1880s, because ice cream sodas were actually banned on Sundays. So I did look this one up. They actually had something called blue laws, which prevented soda from being sold on a Sunday. So what they did is the day of the week is spelled Sunday. They spelled the term Sunday with the ice cream in it Sundae. That is our common spelling today. They did that so that they were too indulgent on the Lord's Day, because it was banned on that day. So someone created a sundae by leaving out the soda and just pulling the syrup and the toppings out. So we had the soda that I was just describing before. So that was banned for being used on Sunday. So they just ended up putting the soda, and then they later called it a sundae so they could have it any day of the week, not just on Sunday of the day of the week. So that's a loophole they had. And suddenly, the floodgates were opened of what would be put on there. We have chocolate sauce, caramel, nuts, whipped cream, cherry on top, of course, is the pretty common thing. Literally, the cherry on top became a thing at that point in time as well. So we went from, Washington and Jefferson saying, here's some frozen cream, to here is, a master crafted dessert in a ice cream sundae with chocolate and nuts and whipped cream and all that kind of stuff. It was basically a masterpiece, and it was filled with dairy, and it was filled with sugar. Everything that I love about it. So in the 1900s, so shortly after that, the 1900s, the 20th century is when things got really crazy with toppings and the way things worked. So I'll kind of walk you through a couple of the greatest hits. Hot fudge made its debut in the early 20s, the 1920s, that is. So its grand entrance was some genius basically realized that warm chocolate and cold ice cream creates taste and a temperature experience, kind of like all the way back to Jefferson. They would serve it in the pastries. I just imagine that those pastries were served warm, although ice cream would melt pretty fast at that point in time. But I would think that they might be warm. Who knows? But either way, I'm sure they were still delicious. So you get the temperature experience of the hot fudge, and then also the ice cream. So pretty cool. We zoom into the 1930s. One of my favorite things that are kind of tasteless, but I love them. Sprinkles arrived on the scene. So little bits of sugar. They were also at that point called Jimmies. So that was something that was very interesting. So you could ask for Jimmies on top of your ice cream. And it depended on where you lived. So as I said, do they add a lot of flavor? I don't know about you, but when I sprinkle some of those on my sundae or on ice cream topping, I usually take a little handful for myself and pop them in. Really doesn't have flavor, just adds more sugar, but they are pretty fun. They're colorful, and all kids' birthday parties and things like that, where they have Sundays, wouldn't be the same without those. So it's a very integral part of the Sunday toppings from where I sit, anyway. And then the 1950s, that is also sometimes called the golden age of the ice cream parlor, because at that time, if you've ever watched any of the old shows, they had ice cream parlors you'd go to, you'd do drive up parlors, etc. The banana split became the saddest symbol of a dessert. 3 full big scoops of ice cream, all 3 kinds of sauces, whipped cream, nuts, cherries, and of course the banana. It's not just ice cream anymore. It was really became an art form of creating these desserts out of ice cream, bananas, and whatever it is as far as the toppings that you wanted to go onto it. So, in addition, also in the 50s, malt shops became a big thing. So that was where diners would go and get a malt. If you've ever been to this might just be where I'm at, but there's a place called Johnny Rockets. They serve old time shakes and old time malts. So they make their malts or they make their shakes, and they actually give you the metal tin. So they give you a glass of it, and then they give you the metal tin that it was created in. So for the extra, and it keeps it super, super, super cold. And you can basically refill your glass when you've gotten low. So it's kind of nice. But yeah, they did all kinds of stuff. So they did all kinds of stuff with toppings. They crushed candy bars. They put cookies in it. Fruit, if you wanted to, you could chop it up. Of course, they had sprinkles. And then, it was a big, big hit. So the 50s had all kinds of malt shops. At that point in time, we started driving. We had drive ups. We had drive throughs. And so you could actually get those and do like drive ups and drive throughs as well. So that was a big impact on the malts in those shops as well. So the 60s and 70s, if you've ever seen the movie Ghostbusters, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, this has nothing to do with that, but it's a great scene when he thinks of the most harmless thing he can, and it's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Well, 60s and 70s, marshmallow sauce was everywhere. It entered the chat. Also, butterscotch, my personal favorite. I love butterscotch candy. I love butterscotch topping. It's just really delicious. To me, a chocolate butterscotch oatmeal cookie is absolutely amazing. I love it. But those were becoming the stars of the show during the 60s and 70s, and they still remain pretty strong today. Maybe not the most popular of things. I'm not a big fan of marshmallow sauce unless it is melted marshmallows for Rice Krispie treats. Those I will eat all day. Also, really good to have a Rice Krispie treat with a nice thing of ice cream on it, and then you can put as many toppings as you want. Just a pro tip there. In the 80s and 90s, we had cookie dough, brownie chunks. People did it entire cookies. So that was the introduction of the ice cream sandwich with the cookies. So if you have a Toll House cookie ice cream sandwich, that is also super delicious. I don't necessarily know if they're Toll House, but people were putting it between cookies. So we were asking ourselves, basically, what can't we put ice cream on? Let's take it to some limits. And they started putting it pretty much on everything. And so far, from a dessert aspect, I can't really think of anything that it won't go on because it really just kind of goes on everything. So now we get into the more modern era. And we are basically living, the golden age of ice cream toppings. So we've got it all. So gourmet options like sea salted caramel, dark chocolate. There are so many things now that include alcohol. So you can have, cherries in bourbon. You can have things that are infused. So you have chocolate that's infused with alcohol, amaretto, all kinds of things are used now that contain alcohol or at least alcohol flavoring for that. If you're an adult, we have cereal. So name a breakfast cereal that you wouldn't put on ice cream. At some point in time, people put granola on it. We've adapted to frozen yogurt. So people put, granola, nuts, Rice Krispies, Fruit Loops, all kinds of stuff. in their ice cream and in their frozen yogurts. So fresh fruit, of course. But now we have all kinds of, different types of strawberries, and we have all kinds of dried fruits, and maybe things that they didn't have back then that are much more fancy than what they used to have. Edible cookie dough. If you remember, way back when they said the cookie dough would give you salmonella. So they now have cookie dough that you can just eat right out of a tub. And who doesn't want to just eat cookie dough? Cookie dough ice cream is probably in one of my top 5. I could definitely eat a lot of it, but got to make sure it's safe. And then, of course, we have all kinds of other odd things now as well. So some things that I think might be a little out there, but I haven't tried. I remember seeing a video of this one where somebody was eating some vanilla ice cream and they topped it with olive oil. Apparently that's a thing. I have not tried that, but I'm never opposed to it. So who knows? Maybe I'll give it a try, and in some future podcast, I'll give it a review for you and we'll see how it goes. But bacon, heck, I love bacon. I don't mind the flavor of bacon. I don't know if it'd be great in ice cream, but I might try it. People do like goldfish crackers. There's more savory things now. People will put herbs and things like that in there. One of the things that I have had before is cayenne chocolate. So if you get some dark chocolate that has some cayenne pepper in it, it gives it that little kick. So I have had like cayenne dark chocolate chips or dark chocolate shell. That's pretty good. Even to the more abstract things like hot Cheetos and, different things like that I saw on here there that people put on their ice cream, just all kinds. We've gone basically from, we've had the basic rice milk that was put in a metal pot that was stuck in the ground in the snow in 200 BC to George Washington and Thomas Jefferson bringing a French dish basically over to America, and then it getting perfected here. And now we are literally putting anything that we can think of on top of it to try to make it more delicious. So it's truly amazing. I probably will have some ice cream tonight after I get all packed for my trip that's coming up this week. And who knows what the heck I'll put on it, but I'm sure it will be delicious. So I want to thank you for tuning in. I would love in the comments section, if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, what kind of toppings that you put into or put onto your ice cream. I think it's cool to get ideas. I think that if you just look up toppings that people put on there, you'll be amazed at what you find. The history of ice cream, then what I was able to discover was pretty fascinating to me. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully it gave you some food for thought, but no pun intended. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were listening safely if you were driving. And I look forward to visiting with you next week as I reach a milestone, which is my 10th episode of this little podcast experiment. I've got some notes in there about what 10 episodes mean for podcasts. And I really hope that if you're watching on YouTube, you'd like and subscribe as well. If you're listening on Spotify or any other podcast software or streaming service, that you would go ahead and give us a like and give us a follow so that you can find future episodes and that you can be alerted. As always, I appreciate your time. Hope you learned something. Hope maybe you got a laugh or a chuckle, and I wish you the best of days. Thanks so much.